My poor little tree.
Guys, look at that little river.
After that crazy storm, we had to patch the roof. And before we get to the crazy landslide in the backyard, there was this pot shelf in a lot of these houses built in the early 2000s. And I always thought it would be a good place to build a library. And so I was wandering around in one of our properties, and there's a Quonset hut, and I found this old ladder. And I thought it'd be perfect for that. It was from an old grain silo. So we took that and we bought a railing from Home Depot and put it up here, and it actually fit perfectly. And then I ended up getting it powder coated, and I think it turned out pretty darn nice. I did have to use a little bit of grinding skills to get some of the burrs off and cut it to length, but all in all, I think it turned out good. So here's a picture of some cute foxes playing outside my back window that I shot while I explain what's going on. So on the last episode, we talked a lot about the remodeling of the house itself, but I didn't really get into some of the craziness on the amounts people wanted to charge. This time we're going to talk about the landslide in the backyard. But when I was going to get this house painted, it's a 2,700 square foot house, so it's a bigger house. The first quote I got was $19,500, and that was the friends and family discount because they knew my sister and my brother. And then as I asked more and more people, I got it down to about $10,500, and that's still a crazy amount to paint a house. So I called my crew up in Arizona, and they agreed to just come on up here. So they went up here and did painted the house for like $4,500. This is us in the backyard doing some metal detecting, and this is what we found. Found a bow, and this is what I found in my last house in the attic, tucked behind a rafter. And here is the quote for the backyard. $200,000 from this person. They had a whole geological survey done from the court case from when the developer and the builder and everybody got sued, and they wanted north of $200,000 to fix this house. So we're like, let's figure out how to do this ourselves. And so I have some connections up here, and so we got to work on this. And here's some of the time lapse of us getting to work. First thing we had to do was to get rid of this tree, and it was kind of a bear. But I wanted to point out, if you see directly behind the tractor right here, we had an access issue. On either side of the house, there's only about 5 feet on either side, and so we couldn't get any equipment back here. I'm sure this access situation detoured a ton of people. Nothing was going to stop me from getting into this backyard. I was going to crane the equipment over the house if I had to, blow out the back of the garage, whatever. I had to track this guy down. We looked on the county records. We ended up having to track him down and mail him letters. Finally got a hold of him, and this was a vacant lot, mind you, no house. Jumped through a bunch of hoops. We offered to weed his lot for him. We offered to add him to our insurance. He had all these conditions. And it took about a month of going back and forth to get this all negotiated, and we thought we were ready to go. And eventually, when it came down to it, I'm like, okay, let's get this signed. And I was ready to sign the papers, and I presented the papers to him. He's like, well, you're going to make a lot of money on this house, and so I think I deserve a portion of what you're making. So how much are you making? And I just was like, oh, you're serious? Are you seriously waiting till the last minute to bring this up? If he would have said, hey, I'll let you through here for a few $1,000s or whatever, that would have been fine. But he didn't. And here's some rando taking pictures, a professional photo shoot of some goats in the backyard. Not sure what that was about. Anyway, so we just went ahead and tore down our fence. As you can see there on the right hand side of the screen, we ended up tearing down the fence and just driving through the front yard. And our neighbor was really cool about it, so we didn't have to deal with that other neighbor that was causing us all kinds of grief. Anyway, I found these concrete pieces that were old. They were pieces of a boat launch that were at the concrete company, so I got a pretty good deal on those. And they were about 14 feet long. And digging these holes and getting these things in straight was really tricky. And there was just no space, and so we're dumping loads of gravel in our yard, in our front yard, trying to figure out how to get in and out of here without destroying absolutely everything. And check this out. As the driver gets out of the truck, he sprains his ankle right here. Boom. Poor guy. Anyway, he stepped right on the side of the driveway and sprained that ankle. So anyway, this is us navigating between these houses, trying with just a skidster and a little excavator, getting all this stuff in the back of the house. And we got pretty creative with hauling this stuff back there. And then the railroad ties that were going for the lateral supports on our retaining wall that we're building, we had to haul those back. And so the problems that we had to solve with this house was, one is access, which I just talked about. Second one was no bank would touch it, which we got a private money lender to handle. The third one is no engineers would touch this house because of the lawsuit. and I'll explain what happened just in a second after I show you this. Every window in this house has just drop dead gorgeous views, and out the front we've got this view of the park, and my wife hiked up there, and this is her and her friend on the top. Anyway, the engineers would not touch this property because of the lawsuit, and so what I ended up having to do is I talked to every engineer in town, and they were just like, oh, they were all giving me the, you know, the slip, and nobody wanted to talk to me. And I finally pinned one down. I said, what's going on here? And I said, listen, there's issues with the slope, and they just didn't want to touch it. So I said, all I need from you is I need a design. You can relieve yourself from liability by saying, hey, there may be some future issues in the future. So basically I gave them an out. I said, just write that on your contract, and I don't have any problem signing that, releasing you from any liability. So I just needed to get the job done. And so on my end, I'm just going to disclose to the new buyer and say, hey, we built this retaining wall. An engineer was involved. However, they didn't want any liability. And so because of the lawsuit in the past, and so the buyer's gonna have to take on that, you know, onerous of that responsibility going forward if there's ever an issue. If they like the work and they're okay with it, then they're gonna have to deal with it. This is me just getting flung around by the excavator. That was kind of fun. But this is the retaining wall we're building. This is the third problem that we had, is we had to build this huge retaining wall, and it was a system. We looked at every single system on the planet. We looked at apex block, helical piers, boulders, all kinds of situations. And honestly, this one was probably the best one, and it was the cheapest one. And we didn't go with it because it was the cheapest, but that was just kind of a happy coincidence. I really like this design, these railroad ties in conjunction with telephone poles. We actually used the concrete. In the future, I probably wouldn't use concrete again. I didn't realize concrete was flexible. And I mean, the strength is there, but it just kind of, it's more flexible than the railroad ties and the telephone poles. So in the future, I would just use telephone poles. Even though the concrete retaining walls look kind of nice, I just probably wouldn't do that next time. We talked about how we got access. And I talked about I needed to figure out what happened. How did this even happen in the first place? So there were several things that caused the landslide. The first thing is you can see there's no hills on this tree side where the retaining wall was. There was that one tree that was dead, but there used to be a bunch of trees along here, and the old owner had taken down all those trees, not realizing that the roots of those trees were holding the hillside up. The second thing was the builder didn't use the proper fill when he pushed this out. He built this house and didn't use the proper fill. And the third thing was there was a broken main from the city in the front yard that saturated the yard and made it all saturated with water. And the last thing was on the side of the house was a drain for the whole neighborhood. All the water runs through the side of the house and out through this thing, and that was cracked as well. So the ground was super saturated with water. It was a crazy wet year, and the whole thing just slumped off. So instead of building the retaining wall one day, we snuck away and had a little bit of fun.
We got Stonehenge here. Wow, this is really cool.
So the other issues we already talked about, having to remodel the house, which we did in the last video. And then of course this had all been done during COVID. So we had some trouble getting some things and slowing things down just a little bit, but that wasn't that big a deal. The last thing is we had to build a deck. I had never built a deck before. This is actually Timmy. He was stuck in some goop down there and had to work his way out.
This is Timmy, stuck in the well. I think you need to turn it towards us.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Good thing I taught him that technique. Stump's right where I cut the hole.
Really?
Good job. Number one.
This auger bit we had for the excavator was a lifesaver. Really made the job go quick. Wait till you see the final product here. I think it turned out awesome.
Watch the wall there. That wall over here. That's what I'm saying. I think he's gonna adjust it now. He's like, I know how to drive. Y'all. Just to give you some perspective of where we're dealing with here. It's down the hill. Yeah.
And then we turned a little bit of our attention towards the deck. I'd never built a deck before, and rather than just fumbling through it, we just hired that engineer to build us some plans, and then we just followed the plans.
So, we've got these concrete insulated forms here. This is all insulation. We're gonna put a deck, so we need to put a ledger board down here. In order to do that though, we have to strip away the insulation. So I've got my hammer drill here with a bit on it. We'll see how it works.
And so one lesson I learned over the years, and I applied to this painting case, whenever I get a bid that I feel like is a little bit high, I say, how long is this gonna take? And they say, it's gonna take a week. And I say, okay, how many guys are gonna be here? There's gonna be 3 guys. Okay, so 3 guys for a week. And I know paint is not that expensive, so I'm timesing the time it takes for 3 guys to be here for a week, and I know that's not 20 grand. And the same thing with the deck. They wanted $20,000 for the deck, and it's going to take 2 guys 2 weeks to do the deck. Okay, and then I know how much the materials are, and so I know that I can probably do that quite a bit cheaper. And I don't normally get this involved in the flips that I do, but because it was COVID, everything was shut down, the world was crazy, the weather was nice up in Montana, I thought it'd be fun to go up here and just hang out and do this project and get my hands dirty and get a little bit of exercise, so it was fun. And I learned a few new skills along the way. And another thing I learned is oftentimes the best deals are the ones where one of 3 things happened. 1, people can't find comparables and can't find out what the value is going to be worth after they're done. Or number 2, it's beyond their typical rehabber scope of work or their comfort level. Or 3, you're just thinking out of the box is required. Here's us building some more of the deck. And if you have not seen this, I'd never seen this before, but there is such a thing as a concrete chainsaw. I did not know that thing even existed. So once we got this retaining wall built, we had to trim these 14-foot poles down to size and had to hire this guy to come out with his concrete chainsaw and trim it and make it look nice. Then we just had to backfill all this material, and I actually made a mistake and drove my skid steer too close to the wall after this was done, and I'll show you what happened after that. But this is the guys pouring the foundations for the deck, and that was a little bit of a chore. And in the front yard we had to repair the driveway that got broken when the water main cracked, so we came in with this chainsaw, filled that in, redid the driveway, poured in some new concrete. And here's some crazy crane stork bird or something like that. And then this is us putting the finishing touches on the deck, putting some weatherproofing on there, getting the decking. I actually slipped on that deck and racked myself pretty good and almost knocked the guy that was helping me off the deck as well. This is us, see that leaning tower there? That is because I drove the skid steer too close to it, so I'll show you in a second what I did to fix that. We had to re-excavate that section because it pushed that pillar out, and so we had to push it back. And so what we had to do is we put an anchor there, put in this cable, anchored it down there, pulled this back, tightened the turnbuckle. It's holding really well. This is a railroad tie, went 8 feet into the ground. Woo! 2, 1, go! Jump off! Yeah, you got it! Woohoo! So there was a lot of firsts for me on this project. I'd never done a retaining wall before. I'd never built a deck before. I mean, I've had people build those things, but it was fun to get my hands dirty and get some exercise by doing this as well. And here are some of the final before and after shots, kind of side by side, so you can see how nasty it was and how broken it was and all the work we had to do to get this back to going. It's not 100% done, but we're most of the way there. So all in all, it took me about 3 to 4 months to complete the project, and cost-wise, to remodel the inside of the house, I was probably about $20,000, and to do the backyard, I was about $20,000 to $25,000. So all in all, I was able to get the project done for around $45,000 rather than $250,000 or something like that I was quoted. So to recap, I got the property for $191,000, put about $45,000 into it, and It's probably worth about $500,000 now. This is a year later. The house across the street, which is smaller than ours, does not have a creek or a view, sold for $450,000. So I think I'm pretty confident at that $500,000 mark. And in the end, when we sell this, that will make a $250,000 profit on this deal. But we're going to keep it for a minute and enjoy it while we can, and then we'll sell it and find something else, another fun project to do. So hopefully this was helpful, and we'll see you on the next video.